Hey everyone, welcome to Area 616. Well, it's almost Valentine's Day, so I figured what better time to talk about a problem the MCU has had pretty consistently since its conception, because that's what people talk about when love is in the air: Marvel. Regardless, a pretty common complaint from Marvel for a long time now has been its romances. From Iron Man and Pepper Potts to Doctor Strange and Christine Palmer, the MCU has had quite a few romances over the years, especially if you count the TV shows, which I am, but the thing is, very few of them are actually good romances. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, for all its many faults, at the very least managed to give us a very good love story, as Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone as Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy just had a lot of chemistry together. So far, most of the decent romances are coming from the TV side of things, whereas the movies are pretty severely lacking. In fact, the only halfway decent romance I can actually think of in a Marvel movie recently was Captain America and Peggy Carter, but even then they were only actually together for, 10 minutes of the movie? By the way, is it just me, or is it a little weird that Cap fell in love with Peggy, then 70 years later fell in love with her niece? A little strange. Regardless, besides that, there's not much to speak of. Pepper and Tony were the first real romance to come out of the MCU, but even then, we go from Iron Man 3, where they're madly in love and Tony blows up his Iron Man suits for her, then immediately to Age of Ultron, where Pepper's oddly absent, and finally to Civil War, where it's revealed Pepper has just left him altogether. A similar thing happened with Thor and Jane Foster, where in the Dark World they're madly in love, and then in Age of Ultron he apparently just kinda left her. Like, assumedly he called her and broke things off before this scene, but still, he just kinda left. But why exactly is it that the romances don't really work? We've had some that just don't have any chemistry whatsoever, like Jane Foster and Thor, some that just kind of fade away, like Pepper and Tony, and some that only exist because they feel like they have to, like with Scott Lang and Hope Pym. And then some that are halfway decent, but only because they actually put some decent effort into establishing some form of relationship between the two, and they actually have, chemistry and stuff. But I think the reason that these romances haven't been very good lately comes from a similar reason to why Marvel's villains, save for a few, have been pretty lackluster overall. Kevin Feige recently addressed this, saying that the reason Marvel's villains kind of suck is because they've always focused much more on the heroes themselves than the villains, believing them to be more important, which is more or less what I think is happening here. One of the things Marvel is undeniably good at is making likable heroes. We've had about 7 different characters serve in the lead role, and we love them all. Even if the movie around them sucks, we don't hate the heroes themselves. That's what Marvel wants. They put a substantial amount of effort into making sure that their heroes are as likable as humanly possible. But the problem is that the other mildly important things, such as, the story and the villain, sometimes they just get a bit overlooked, along with romance. I think that most of the time romance is only put in simply because they feel like it has to be. It's worth noting that some of Marvel's absolute best movies lately are ones that have not focused entirely on romance. Iron Man, The Avengers, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Ant-Man, Captain America Civil War, not to mention Daredevil Season 1, which has kept the romance to a minimum. So it just goes to show that clearly romance is something Marvel needs to a degree, but they're just not very good at it. The TV side of things has actually had quite a few decent romances. There are a bunch of couples in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but a standout is Fitzsimmons. Then in Daredevil Season 2, Matt and Karen had decent chemistry, even if it was a bit cheesy sometimes. Luke Cage and Claire Temple have good chemistry together, even if I'm not 100% a fan of them being together. I can't deny they do fit. The reason for this is pretty simple. as they have more time to develop the characters and their relationships. The TV shows also place a lot of importance in developing the main hero, but because they have more time, they can also put importance in developing other things like the villain. So how can Marvel fix this problem? It's undeniable that their main hero's first approach has worked out very well for them, so it probably wouldn't be a good idea to just abandon it altogether. However, I think the first thing Marvel needs to do is realize that they don't always need a romance. They do it to make characters more relatable and all that, but that isn't necessary to achieve that. Characters can be human and relatable without being in some kind of relationship. And I think that Marvel's realizing that in a way. Thor Ragnarok, for example, is said to have no romance in it at all, that I know of. So, that's not to say that there's no place for romance in the MCU, quite the opposite, but it should only be where it contributes to the story, instead of taking away from it. And when it is there, it needs to be decently written, or at the very least, have two people that have a lot of chemistry together. We have a TV show coming up about Cloak and Dagger, which is set to be, for the most part, a love story. So only time will tell how they do there. But in any event, let me know who your favorite Marvel couple, movies or comics, is in the comments below. Thanks for watching, happy almost Valentine's Day, and I'll see you all next time.